Hi there, I'm Misty. I'll be your guide to the world of the new and improved NIST Cybersecurity Framework. We can provide high-level guidance and a common language for managing your cybersecurity risks across all sectors and across any organization, no matter how big or small. Let me give you the highlights.
Thanks, Nisty. Hi, everyone. I'm Sylvia, staff writer with GovCIO Media and Research, and your host for today's episode of CyberCast. The Cybersecurity Framework version 2.0 from the National Institutes of Standards and Technology, or NIST, has turned 1 year old. Since it was first published, NIST has released industry-specific startup guides to encourage enterprise leaders to use the framework. Stephen Quinn, the technical lead for the Cybersecurity Framework 2.0, and I chatted about how the framework holistically highlights the critical need for cyber hygiene from the factory floor to the boardroom.
We don't need to force cybersecurity language into the boardroom, nor do we need to force that language, the boardroom language, into the folks who are actually doing the implementation of security controls to improve the security posture, right? But we need kind of that. We need the two to meet together. And in order to do that, and there's nothing wrong with cross-pollinating across the organization, right? I mean, this encourages that process as well, but we also don't want to ignore tried and true and proven existing processes that we can just interface with, such as enterprise risk management.
Version 2.0 continues to examine the cyber landscape and the attack vector. It also offers a feedback loop with the newest core function, Govern, to ensure continuous improvement of an organization's cybersecurity posture. CSF comes nearly 10 years after version 1.0 and 6 years after version 1.1, which both focused on using common language to address and manage cyber risk without placing additional regulatory requirements on businesses. Quinn said things like cyber risk, privacy risk, or AI risk tend to get siloed from one another and can be treated differently. The govern function serves as a way to show the impact of cyber on an enterprise. Teams can see that cyber isn't more or less important than others, like financial or reputational risk.
Organizations generally have a process, especially larger enterprises. They have a process with being able to deal with risk in those disciplines. So what we've done is we've really cast cybersecurity risk in the govern function in the language that would be most familiar to folks in the boardroom and enterprise risk officers, to kind of demystify the cyber aspect of it and get it into a format such as risk registers that can be organized into enterprise risk profiles, so that executives can make decisions about buying down risk, comparing apples to apples, right? So it's very formulaic and very standardized from the common body of knowledge. So we've really created a companion set of documents to the cybersecurity framework.
NIST isn't just relying on the in-house research of best practices. Through requests for public comments, NIST is engaging with community partners to find new approaches in securing emerging technologies like AI.
So some of the space, like as cyber interacts with AI, zero-day attacks are very well known, right? They come out of the blue, seemingly, right? And you don't have a lot of time to react to it. It hasn't been characterized in the community, and so you're on the defense immediately. You might be ground zero for it. Sometimes those take a significant amount of resources to create, right? With AI, it's very possible that the adversary can be creating those quickly, right? How do we change inside the cybersecurity framework our methods of defense? For example, identifying them rapidly, right? What do we have to do to change in our response subcategories in order to deal with these events that become much more common than they are right now, right? So we're asking the community, we're pondering it ourselves. How does this affect cybersecurity in the advent of AI if it's going to be used against systems in this way? So that's just kind of one example. But we're studying these areas from a cybersecurity perspective to learn. And we certainly are inviting the comments from the community to see if and when we might actually need to modify the cybersecurity framework to address these security trends.
Quinn also encouraged our listeners to take a look at the OMB Circular A-123, which asks agencies to highlight both the positives and negative outcomes while they evaluate their risk.
Risk is really uncertainty, right? So if you're managing uncertainty, we normally think of it in a negative sense, like what bad's going to happen, we're going to protect against that, right? But uncertainty is also opportunity. So we're trying to help cast cyber risk in a way that's not always about defense, right? It's about realizing opportunities as well. So we kind of provide some guidance about what they are and the idea of you need to plan for success in addition to planning against failure.
CSF 2.0 is full of resources for every organization to improve monitoring and responding to cybersecurity incidents. Versions 1.1 and 1.0 were more focused on strengthening critical infrastructure's cyber posture, but Quinn and his team at NIST wanted to ensure everyone had those resources with the latest version. Organizations outside of the critical infrastructure have been using versions 1.1 and 1.0, but with 2.0, they can utilize organizational profiles and community profiles.
There's something called an organizational profile, which is an inwardly focused assessment on your security posture. Where you are is called your current state, and where you want to go is called your target state. And a gap analysis between those two will demonstrate to you where you need to focus your attention. A community profile is a little bit different. It's a profile for organizations or technologies that have a common interest. And there's lots of these. It could be, we have a manufacturing computer or community profile. We have one for software development. And these are all on the website at the National Cybersecurity Center of Excellence. But community profiles is something that if you're in one of those sectors, you may want to start with those because they've identified a common target state for their technology or for their vertical.
At the end of the day, the CSF 2.0 is a framework that organizations can use to guide their cyber assessments, but it's also a great resource for organizations to test their cyber posture with a gap analysis.
Quite frankly, we see organizations going through the subcategories of the core and asking questions of themselves like, is this a problem for me, right? What attack vector, when they think about threat scenarios, what attack vector is this trying to protect against? And is that germane to my security posture, right? So they can use it as a tool for tabletop exercises when they're trying to identify risks. Certainly not a way we thought about it when we put it out there, but certainly a great use case, right? Other organizations are using it as an organizing principle to make sure they're covering their bases, right? When you get away from the govern function and you get into the identify, detect, protect, respond, recover functions, the 5 really cyber-focused functions, those organizations are really designed to improve the security posture. But the cybersecurity framework is just that. It's a framework. It's at a higher level, right? I'm not actually giving you instructions on how to secure your computer, right? In order to do that, you have to follow what we refer to as the informative references that are mapped to the cybersecurity framework subcategory, and sometimes the category. That will take you a level deeper into perhaps what security control you need to implement if you want to satisfy this subcategory's recommendation.
Thanks for listening to this episode of CyberCast. If you're interested in learning more about the CSF 2.0, be sure to attend our annual cybersecurity summit, Cyberscape, on April 3rd. Thanks for listening.